this whole affair, this whole celebration. To the women who've just lifted their voices, all the performers, Governor Tony Evers, Mayor of Madison, Paul Soglin, Dr. Jonathan and Amy Overby, officials, clergy, listeners, viewers, and all of you. Your acknowledgement of the birth, the life, and the death of Martin Luther King Jr. means that we are all from the same tribe. We are the evidence that truth is marching. It is a West African concept that we live life on 3 levels. The living like you and I, responsible for the times we are in. The living dead like Jesus, Indira Gandhi, Lincoln, relatives that have become ancestors, or anyone deceased but whom we speak about. And lastly, the dead and gone, the people for whom no one on the earth utters their name. You are here today to keep the Martin Luther King Jr. ideals alive. As we focus on women this year, we must acknowledge that women have taken moments in this society and changed them and transformed them into a movement for change in the world. As we touch our humanity, we can see our lives in the lives of ordinary women. We can see our power. For our youth, and out of respect to his story and her story, allow me to go back so that we can press forward. Martin Luther King Jr. would call the murder of 14-year-old Emmett Till in 1955, who was accused of whistling at a white woman, one of the most brutal and inhumane crimes of the 20th century. For most of his life, King would use the Till murder as an example of the evils of racial injustice. But it was Mamie Till, a grieving mother, who would open the casket, calling worldwide attention to her son's bloated, beaten face and an appalling vision of racial injustice. A mother's grief primed a movement. I am from Chicago and know that in 2019, African-American mothers all over this country are still grieving the wrongful deaths of their sons and daughters. As we build our tribe, awakened women and men must lift their voices across aisles and racial lines for these injustices to stop. Only our sincere acknowledgement of humanity can create an effective call to action. Like Mamie Till's wails for her son, we as the women, the mothers, the sisters of this time must excavate our voices, sound a powerful battle cry, and march for truth. 3 months after Mamie Till created an international stage by calling attention to her son's murder, Martin Luther King would rise as a national figure from his role as the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott. Just as Rosa Parks was not the first woman to sit on a bus and refuse to give up her seat, refusals by courageous men and women were often followed by arrests. But just prior to Rosa Parks' arrest, a 15-year-old girl named Claudette Colvin was handcuffed and arrested because she refused to give up her seat. She was 15 and pregnant. And it was not the judgment of an unmarried pregnancy, but the compassion of the Negro community that loathed the inhumanity of arresting a young pregnant woman. We cared about our children. That act stirred the chaos of many people who had been stumbling around in the deep, dark well of racism. They had started to look for the light, and Rosa Parks found the switch. When she sat down, a national and international movement began. Because media coverage was worldwide, donations to fight this injustice came from all over the world. Our choice to stand or sit will change the times we live in. As women, I want to encourage you to, by all means, grow tired of what is wrong in our society. Your tiredness creates some of the best boots and heels on the ground. It is not fatigue. It is an indication that you have the ability to change the world. King had studied Mahatma Gandhi, but many of the less educated people in the South didn't know who Gandhi was. a well-respected, well-to-do white woman, a librarian who began to integrate Bible studies in the Negro community and would start to pull emergency stops when bus drivers would ignore colored passengers. Juliette Morgan likened King's movement to Gandhi, and she wrote the newspapers to say so. As a result of her pen, the entire South and many people worldwide began to acknowledge Gandhi's philosophy on nonviolent social change. Morgan wrote, "It is hard to imagine a soul so dead, a heart so hard, a vision so blinded and provincial as not to be moved with admiration at the quiet dignity, discipline, and dedication with which the Negroes have conducted their boycott." Unfortunately, she became a victim of cross burnings, was alienated and harassed by the racist community until her untimely death. Freedom continues to be a costly fight. As we pause to remember Mamie Till, Claudette Colvin, Rosa Parks, and Juliette Morgan, humanity is juxtaposed against the inhumanity of racism. We must continue to march for truth, recovering from our casualties. We have opened caskets, used our pens, stood up, and sat down. We have used moments to launch movements. In the spirit of Claudette Colvin, I hear our youth. Young people, as part of this tribe, you form a regiment in this army for truth, and you are capable of discerning what is wrong and what is right in this country. We hear your voices when Black Lives Matter not only marches, but buys houses to renovate for low-income families. We hear you when you take to the podium and challenge the nation's gun laws because your brothers and sisters and classmates have been killed. We see you when you vote. King said, "He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as the one who perpetrates it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it." As women, men, and children, we must not cooperate with evil. We must challenge evil in order to destroy it. To the LGBTQ community, Martin Luther King was questioned about his support of Bayard Rustin because of Rustin's homosexuality, but Rustin's homosexuality did not stop him from having led protest marches in the United States during the 40s or worked to better the condition of the untouchables in India. Eventually, King wrote, "We are thoroughly committed to the method of nonviolence in our struggle, and we are convinced that Bayard's expertness and commitment in this area will be of inestimable value. You may march on now." It's true, as women, we were not always fully respected in the early years of the civil rights movement. Yet, as we march now, we march at a different time when one of our challenges is to fully respect one another. We will have differences. Our goal is to increase the tribe, not to alienate others. Thank you. I say this knowing that it will be hard for some of us to accept others of us. While understanding and friendship occurs one heart at a time, let's agree that all our human rights must be fought for and respected. When the 116th Congress convened on January 3rd, 132 women from both sides of the aisle had an opportunity to take their seats. And while that's 24% of the population, of which women make up 51%, we are moving down what activists and our late Queen of Soul called better than ever street. From many states, these women are the first women to take their seats in our Congress. They are Black, white, Latina, Somalian, Asian, Native American like Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland. They will serve and they will identify as veteran, openly bisexual, gay, married, divorced, and single. They will be so young, as in the case of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at 29, that Maya Angelou would have called her new as morning. And they will serve with veterans such as Maxine Waters, whose 40 years of congressional experience is well respected. They are Christian, Jewish, Catholic, and Muslim, career politicians, former stewardess, and waitresses with little money in the bank. One having lost both legs during war in our military, another a son to violence on the streets. They are breast cancer survivors. They will join men in Congress, and all those who are awake will march for truth. They will make mistakes. They will stumble. They will not be the first nor the last to do so. But with understanding, we must shoulder them up because we are their keepers, and we must march on all fronts. When Ava DuVernay directed Selma, she opened the film with the 4 young girls killed in the 1963 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. When she directed 13, taking on the 13th Amendment and voter suppression through the lack of ex-convicts having voter rights, a few years later, we are witnessing the right of former convicts to vote in the state of Florida. Our voices have been raised with the Me Too movement that Tarana Burke so fittingly began. As Black, brown, and white women, we are standing up against sexual predators in the workplace. My skin is not the beauty of Lupita Nyong'o, but a beauty of a lighter hue. I am 3 generations removed from slavery, and I can assure you my light skin did not come from consensual sex in the workplace of slavery. The very shades of the brownness of our people is our skin blood evidence that we're your cousins, we're your kin, we're your brothers and sisters. You and I are the second wave, the women of encouragement calling this world to action, grandmothers with gavels and law keepers of color from Texas to New York. As we increase our achievements, we will change the laws and change our everyday circumstances. This is how we are changing the world. As Sojourner Truth said, truth is powerful and it prevails. As ordinary women, each one of us must take moments in history and turn them into movements great and small. Prevail. As Maya Angelou said, you alone are enough. That means together we are more than enough. As Oprah Winfrey says, you don't get what you want, you get what you believe. Belief causes us to take action. In the late 60s, in our South suburban Chicago home, I watched my parents stand straighter when they talked about Martin Luther King Jr. They said he was a minister for better housing and integrated schools. Later, as my mother snapped beans at the kitchen table with the women in the community, I heard them lament the fact that our Dick and Jane readers from 1st grade followed us to 2nd grade, and now we had them again in 3rd grade. They have been fighting for desegregation for 10 years. Tired of our separate but unequal education, not in the South, but in the South suburbs of Chicago, our blue-collar town believed they could change our circumstances. They worked together, finally integrating the schools after Martin Luther King Jr.'s death in 1968. Outfitted in our best school clothes, rubbed with Jergens lotion, and our hair slicked with Dixie Peach pomade. We dreamed about what white people would look like up close. Then we folded our jump ropes to present them as a gesture of friendship during recess. Our parents waved us onto the bus and went to their jobs. But our bus arrived to less than a welcoming crowd. White women and some white men called us names we'd not been called before. They lined the sidewalk to the door of Eisenhower School, and we trembled our way into a place where we were supposed to learn. I told that story recently and had a woman who considered herself to be liberal ask, "Didn't your parents prepare you?" That is the modern-day definition of white privilege, and what James Baldwin called these yet-to-be United States. It means a car, a coffee shop, a dorm, or a hotel could be our undoing. This errant reality in the minds of some people, the very idea that victims of racism are somehow responsible for it and perpetrators of racism are just simply living life, ought to make you want to put your boots on. I have a flyer you can disseminate in the words of Martin Luther King Jr. The storm is rising against the privileged minority of the earth from which there is no shelter in isolation or armament. And you told us the storm will not abate until a just distribution of the fruits of the earth enables men and women everywhere to live in dignity and human decency. In racism, the first attack is always against dignity and human decency. And it's not up to blacks alone to fight for our freedom, but for whites to recognize and denounce privilege in order to create change. Until black and brown children stop marking the loss of their innocence with the day that they realize that they are being marginalized in this society, and until white children stop ingesting the misperception that this society renders them privileged and better than, and until we care for brown children at the border of Mexico as if they were in our own arms, we must continue to march out of darkness. As we acknowledge Martin Luther King's commitment to his faith, and I, as a woman of that same faith, know that we start simply with the first words of the Bible. In the beginning, God created. Those words meaning that all of us born in the image of God are first and foremost creators. We are, as the mothers of the church said, able to make a way out of no way. We can look into nothing, chaos, and all manner of darkness, confusion, and the undefined before us and know, even in our childhood, that we constitute change. So the young boy that would later walk by trees where the bodies of Negroes had hung, who had witnessed police brutality with his own eyes, as well as seeing the Ku Klux Klan ride at night, he knew he was seeing chaos. At one point he wrote, "I had come perilously close to resenting all white people. I want to issue your uniform for the march with these instructions. You can march with passion, but you cannot march effectively with resentment." Had Martin Luther King Jr. resented whites, we would not be here. Had he, being economically secure and well-educated, had not had a heart for the poverty-stricken regardless of color, we might not be here. Young King knew the Bible story of hate that killed a brother. When Cain killed his brother Abel, he was asked by God, "Where is your brother Abel?" King made a decision to love because he knew hate causes your soul to be questioned by God. And the lie you tell yourself and others by saying, "I don't know," calls you to have the arrogance to question God. Abel's futile, "Am I my brother's keeper?" is a response, and we know the answer. We are all our brothers and sisters' keepers. The final question that God asked Abel is the question all of us must ask ourselves. What have you done? So I ask you, what have you done to bring about justice? What have you done to eradicate racism? Do you as a person, a government, a corporation, include and value black and brown people in your thought and management and planning process? Have you hired us in your firms, your stores, made space in the school and the administration? Have you asked the question in your community or educational system when you walk into segregated situations, why does this company, this school, this guild, this union, this foundation not look like the world? Ask questions, make changes. Have you personally gone past the optics of diversity to inclusion? Just as we are each other's keepers, each of us can and must do something, since silence has a voice. When Cain failed to answer the question, "What have you done?" God said, "Listen. Your brother's blood cries out from the ground." I don't know about you, but as truth is marching, I hear blood. 400 years ago in 1619, when the soles of my ancestors' bloody feet still in shackles touched what would be called American soil, they understood it was a shameful entry. They knew that there was no beauty in shackles, nothing precious about the kind of chain that hangs around the neck of a man, a woman, or a child. It is the shackle that still comes when one brother believes he is better than another, when a sister or brother kills the dreams of this country and puts lashes across the souls of his brothers and sisters. Those ancestors, theirs were the first steps in truth marching, and our task is to make sure truth arrives. In 1955, after being educated at Morehouse and Crozer Theological Seminary, Martin Luther King Jr. and his wife, Coretta Scott King, made a prayerful decision to return with their family to the hate-filled South instead of staying Northeast with hopes for a better life. When Martin Luther King Jr. was called to Alabama to the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, I believe he heard blood. When I worked with Maya Angelou for Oprah Radio from 2006 to 2010, we would often discuss her relationship with Martin Luther King Jr. She saw him speak at Riverside Baptist Church in New York in the 60s and was moved to organize artists in the community to raise money for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She would later become their Northern coordinator. She remembered King fondly as a man who liked to play practical jokes and had a good, healthy sense of humor. In 2006, Maya Angelou and I attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C. Later, Maya Angelou took issue with the inscription on the monument. Taken from a speech he gave 2 months prior to his assassination, the quote originally read, "If you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness, and all of the other shallow things will not matter." But the inscription on the monument read, "I was a drum major for justice." Maya Angelou found the omission of "if you want to say" objectionable, and so I got a phone call. Maya Angelou had a habit of calling and saying, "It is I, Maya Angelou," as if I would ever mistake her voice. And I would say, "Hello, doctor." On this day, she said, "People are making a big miration over something they say I said regarding Martin." I said, "What was that?" She said, "They said I said. The inscription on the monument in D.C. made him sound like an arrogant twit." I said, I don't know anyone else that would put those two words together. She said, "Okay, I said it. Now what do we do?" I said, "Speak to the media." She said, "I will not be a temptress in a teapot." I had to unpack that statement, and then I said, "Then choose who you will speak to." She said, "I'll have that young Don Lemon. I like him very much, and one more and not another." After that, the true mirations began because the inscription on that monument was changed. What we do as women is important. Whatever the strength of your voice, your reach, or your ability, let's use the power that we have. I see you. I see your tiredness, as well as some of you that have the joy of accomplishments and love. I see you single, divorced, married. I see those who have been abused. Some of us entering the thick of or fresh out of a storm. But know that all your good and all your bad only qualify you to march. As you march, you will find out more about yourself, and we will find out more about each other as human beings. As I stand here, I thank Martin Luther King Jr., who could have been 90 years old and enjoying his grandchildren, but instead he sacrificed his life. I thank my deceased father, Charlie Coburn, and my 96-year-old mother, Willie Coburn, for raising me and all they went through to raise a black child in what was thought to be a white America. I am reminded that my mother's father was born into slavery, and he was taught to read by two white women that decided to break rank with the norm of their day. When he became free at 8 years old, he continued to read and to study. He was known as an orator, and eventually he would speak in the black church on the first and third Sunday and teach Sunday school at the white church to children on the second and fourth Sunday. I thank those two women I will never know. It is in their spirit that I stand here. As Maya Angelou would say, I come as one and I stand as 10,000. May the ancestors be pleased with our time together. As truth marches, I am proud to be a member of your tribe. I see you, I join you. I hear blood. Even louder, I hear your voice. Louder still, I hear your power. Loudest of all, I hear our future. And our future is the truth. Thank you.